Welcome back. Today, we're diving into a really high-stakes diplomatic move, a proposed summit between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Now, this isn't just any old meeting. Nope. It's a carefully staged event that could have huge implications for global power, and we're going to break it all down for you. So, you got to ask, what's this really all about? Is this a genuine effort to bring peace to Ukraine? Or is it something else? A calculated move in a much, much bigger game of global influence. That's the core question we're digging into today. And get this, even the setting is loaded with meaning. Alaska, a place the U.S. actually bought from Russia way back in 1867. The date, August 15th, 2025. This location, it's a powerful symbol, right? It's meant to bring up this idea of a shared history. And maybe, just maybe, shared interest in things like the Arctic and energy. Okay, so to really get what this summit is about, you have to look past the idea of some big peace deal. This is all about symbolism. It's about projecting power, it's about shaping how everyone sees this, and it's about strategic positioning on the world stage. So what's the expected outcome? Well, don't hold your breath for a detailed peace treaty or a ceasefire. Instead, what sources are telling us is to expect some pretty vague joint statements. Things about a commitment to peace. The whole thing is designed to look productive, to play up the personal chemistry between the two leaders, but without really changing a thing on the ground. And Russia is already drawing its red lines, and they're doing it with absolute clarity. Here's their foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, making it explicit. He says Ukrainian territories that Russia has annexed, well, they're an integral part of their country, and are completely 100% off the table for any kind of negotiation. And just in case that wasn't clear enough, this is being reinforced from the very top. Putin himself comes out and says sovereignty over these areas is absolute and non-negotiable. He's not just stating a position, he's setting the fundamental limits for the entire conversation before it even begins. The message couldn't be clearer. We can talk, but we are not talking about giving back territory. Okay, so given those pretty firm Russian red lines, what does each side actually want to get from this meeting? Well, even though their big picture goals are totally different, what they want from this summit right now is actually surprisingly complementary. For the Trump administration, it's all about a domestic political win, looking like a decisive deal maker who can cut back on America's financial commitments to Ukraine. For Putin, this is a huge diplomatic victory. Just having the meeting elevates Russia's stature on the world stage and reinforces its claim to be a global power, right up there on equal footing with the United States. But, and this is a really big but, while Washington and Moscow see some potential wins here, the view from across the Atlantic, completely different. In Europe, the reaction to this is overwhelmingly negative, and it gets to the very core of their security. European leaders are looking at this as a unilateral American move that just shatters the united front they've tried to build against Russian aggression. From where they're sitting, a summit that pushes Ukraine to the side doesn't just undermine NATO, it basically rewards the violation of international law. It legitimizes it. And listen, this isn't just one or two countries raising an eyebrow. This concern is spread all across the continent. We're talking about the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, and the European Commission itself has voiced serious alarm. They're afraid of a fractured NATO alliance and a newly emboldened Russia. All right, now we have to turn to Ukraine, the country at the absolute center of this entire conflict. For them, this isn't some abstract geopolitical chess match. No, this is an existential threat, and their perspective is one of deep, deep concern. To put it bluntly, Kyiv sees this summit as a profound diplomatic betrayal. The fear, the very real fear, is that a deal is going to get struck right over their heads. A deal that freezes the conflict, solidifies Russia's territorial gains, and completely cuts them out of negotiations about their own country's future. And while the West is consumed by all this drama, there's another major player just watching, quietly, patiently. For China, this whole distraction isn't a crisis. It's an opportunity. China actually benefits in a few ways here. First, as long as the US and Europe are all wrapped up with Russia, there's way less pressure on them. Second, any event that kind of checks American power and promotes a more multipolar world, well, that fits perfectly with their long-term strategy. And finally, they can just sit back and position themselves to play a role, economically or diplomatically, in whatever happens next. So, after looking at all these competing interests, from Washington to Moscow, from Brussels to Kyiv, and all the way to Beijing, what's the bottom line here? What should you really take away from this incredibly complex diplomatic dance? What this breakdown really shows us is that this is a high-stakes gamble for pretty much everyone involved. The US is betting it can get a domestic win without completely fracturing NATO. Russia is betting it can boost its global status without the whole thing being seen as just for show. And meanwhile, the EU and Ukraine are just desperately trying to avoid a future where their security and their sovereignty are decided for them. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. In a summit that is so heavily focused on symbolism, on perception, and on strategic positioning, you just have to wonder, is the act of playing the game itself, just holding the summit, more important to the players than whatever outcome it might actually produce?